Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in. And I have a especially warm welcome to the people from Hannon House who are joining us. And we also have a number of people from the Charles H. Wright Museum. We've been in contact and we've been talking to Reggie Woolery, who is really the director of education at the museum, and he has helped us contact and get our two speakers today. So far in this term, we have heard about the reasons for the migration from the north to the north. We've heard about the spokespeople and the social shapers of the period, the popular theater, movies, music, and dances that were fostered by this movement. And as we continue to explore the different facets of the Harlem Renaissance, today we'll be focusing on the new sophistication in style and dress. We're very honored to have two successful international designers with us today. Shawna McGee. Shawna is a Cass Tech alumni, a local girl that really made well. She went on to graduate from the Parsons School of Design. She has designed for some of the largest American brands, including Anne Klein, Liz Claiborne, and Ralph Lauren, as well as designing clothes for people on television and other celebrities. Her works have been in Women's Wear Daily, Elle, and Vogue. Shawna was a fashion design professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology and Parsons School of Design before she decided to return to Detroit and start developing her own bespoke collection. We also have Leonard Davis. Leonard is a native of Washington, D.C. He graduated from the Fashion Institute of Technology and, see if I don't screw this up, l'École de la Chambre Syndicale de la Couture Parisienne in Paris. Davis is one of the first African American fashion designers to head divisions for large companies such as Adriana Papel and Chaus. He has appeared in numerous magazine and newspaper articles, and several of his items are on display at the African American Museum of Art and Culture in DC. The Davis collection was recently exhibited in Black to the Future, the 2020 Black History Month exhibit at the FIT. He also collects Black Americana and has been featured in numerous shows, including Antiques Roadshow and Treasures in Your Home. As always, your microphones are turned off. Please address all your questions in the chat to me, Joe Quapish, and I will forward them to our speakers. So without any further delay, here's Shawna McGee.
Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you and see you all today. My name, of course, is Shawna McGee, and I am your co-moderator today for this amazing subject. As he said before, a lot of you have already heard about the Harlem Renaissance as far as other things like politics, the music, the Great Migration, but you haven't heard a lot about the clothing. So today we're going to talk about that. So there are some of you who weren't part of the other Zoom talks that talked about those things. So I'm just going to give you a quick brief introduction to what the Harlem Renaissance was. So the Harlem Renaissance was a period of what I call Black culture excellence during the 20s and 30s. It was a period of new awakening in Black culture, in music, literature, politics, art, and fashion. Some of the artists that you might want to get to know is like this picture here. That's of Aaron Douglas, his art. Some of the writers like Langston Hughes were popular. Some of the musicians that were popular during the period were Ma Rainey, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Josephine Baker, to name a few. So this was really a time of rebirth for the for African Americans during this period. And what was happening at this time in New York was something new. It was like something brand new for us. So basically, at the time, this was the time of the Great Migration. Next slide. So during the Great Migration, you can go to, yeah, during the Great Migration, it was a time of oppression in the South, and Black people wanted to escape this oppression. We were working really hard as sharecroppers on the field, and there was a lot of oppression with the Ku Klux Klan, segregation, just hardship, a lot of hardship for our people. So we wanted to escape this whole period. And some of the things that we're going to get into the clothes for this time, because if you can see in some of these clips, for instance, you see the family on the porch. This is typical of what they were wearing at this time. A lot of cottons, of course, because of the fields, we were picking cotton, and there were a lot of cottons, like with the pants, the shirt, the scarf that this man is wearing with his hat, the woman with the cotton dress, the little girl with the cotton dress. So the clothes were a bit worn, and they were worn because they didn't have a lot of money, and they could only afford a certain amount of clothing. So I have to say, even though they're worn, they still have a lot of style. Look how this young man has his hat tilted to the side. There's a lot of attitude and pride, even though you don't have a lot of money. The clothes might be worn and ripped or whatever. And it's funny because now ripped clothing, they make a fortune selling ripped clothing, but here they're like, we want to remove ourselves from that. We want to wear nice things. In the clip before this, right before this one, there was the young men in the dungarees. You see the little dungarees that they're wearing, they're a bit worn, and the shirts and everything, but they actually still had a bit of style to them, even though this is all they had. And these were their like field clothes that they were wearing. Go to the next one. As they decide to leave the South, the clothes that they choose to wear are a bit more spiffy. Go to the next slide, please. They were a bit more spiffy. They were in suitings and hats. Yes, thank you. You see how they're dressed? They're dressed a little better than the way they were on the fields and in a casual way. This is their look for traveling. They want to get themselves together, and they want to look good as they move north, because you don't know what's going to happen on the road. You have to present yourself well. This is deep South. So you have to look like you're law-abiding citizens. Look, they got grandma, grandpa, probably the young kids, everything is packed and ready to go. And they're looking forward to this new life in the North for new opportunities, jobs, and everything, that's going to come their way. So you should know what was happening at this time. There were a lot of negative images of Black people at this time. You see, there was croons, there was the minstrel show, which were like white men who were dressed in blackface. There was Aunt Jemima. There were all of these really bad negative images of Black people that the white media decided this is who we want to portray Black people as. Look at this picture here, this little girl on the right bottom. That's actually Shirley Temple. So that says to me, somebody like this sweet Shirley Temple, I watched all of her shows, but this says to me, you're teaching the children to actually believe and think that this is the image that Black people should have. Aunt Jemima, the sort of this cartoon on the left of the Black woman who's like supposed to be like a Jezebel. And this is what was portrayed of Black people, typically at this time in the media. But that is not the narrative that we had of ourselves. We wanted to change this whole thing. This is what you saw in the North as well, not just the South. You saw it in the North as well. And we wanted to change that and take the narrative back and make it more positive, because we felt that we were more intelligent than this. We dressed well, we were getting more educated, and it was showing in this brand new culture that was happening in the North. So here we are with the entertainers of this period. So that was the image that you saw that the white media decided to have of Black people. This is where we take control and say, we're not that. This is who we are. Look at Duke Ellington here. Beautiful, top hat, suit, tuxedo, white tuxedo here. The Nicholas brothers, Billie Holiday, very elegant here with her earrings and her beautiful bow front dress. Next one. Josephine Baker, style icon. Look how gorgeous she is, slip dress. Look at her hair, cut short, fabulous with the furs. So we were saying we are not that negative image. We are fabulous. We are fierce. We are amazing. And some of these entertainers during this period were like Dizzy Gillespie, Bessie Smith, Ethel Waters, Josephine Baker. In the middle there, that was the original Betty Boop. She was a Black woman. And so on and so forth. So this was a time of elegance for us, a time for us to shed that whole sharecropper backwoods image and to take hold of this and change it and make it better for ourselves. We wanted to show a different side. And it was so fabulous, actually, that white people from uptown, downtown were actually coming uptown to see us at places like Cotton Club. Mind you, Cotton Club was a business, a theater that didn't allow Black people, but it was all Black people who were performing. And when they were performing, sometimes they have these the stage would be like Southern antebellum or plantations or something. I mean, when Dizzy Gillespie played, he had a different set. But, you know, the thing was, that's why they called it the Cotton Club, because they wanted to sort of continue that whole narrative of Blacks being beneath them in a way, with not letting go of the whole Southern oppression. So here we are, some of the dresses that some of those girls would wear in the Cotton Club as dancers and stuff would be like the flapper outfit, like this little flippy dress. And some actually were sexier, but then you have this flapper outfit in the middle here with the pearls and the gloves and the little feather on the top. And the couple on the right, you know, this is like a social occasion kind of look that they would wear. Maybe they could go into Cotton Club, but maybe they would wear this type of thing to the Savoy or Apollo. So what was happening, so that's what you saw with the entertainers, this whole glamorous, they were like red carpet before there was a real red carpet, honestly. So what was happening was that in the day wear, women's wear for day, you had these women who were really quite fierce. So this look is very different from what you saw before when they left the South. You have a larger middle class that is building up. Like, look at this woman here on the left. She has her beautiful bow blouse, her hat, her top coat, her fabulous shoes, and she's posed in front of this shiny car. I mean, they left the little hoopty car in the South, and now you're looking a lot more sophisticated with this whole look. On the right, you see the touches of fur They probably weren't really wearing this down in themselves. It's probably too hot to wear it anyway. And she has her beautiful stockings on, her shoes, and the girls in the middle. This is amazing because this is the period when menswear started to become more important in women's wear. You see, she has her palazzo pant, the two of them. So they were probably, that was probably a pretty sassy look for that time, you know, because this was before women's lib. So women, though, were starting to become more liberated during this period, even though a lot of the Black women at this time were probably, their jobs were more domestic jobs. Now, I have to say, let's go to the next slide, that you have all these great clothes. Look, more pants, the pleated skirt. You have Josephine Baker over here. It looks like a cotton coat with the stripe and the chevron stripe at the bottom. This is all very incredible detail on these clothes. And she's wearing her great hat. And the everyday woman wore hats. It wasn't just celebrities. Look at these girls in the middle. They're wearing hats. They're wearing jewelry. They're wearing stockings. They're wearing shoes. There's like a sense of pride and sophistication that is happening within this whole movement. Now, I must say that with these clothes, it makes you wonder, okay, in the North, there wasn't segregation, but it was unspoken segregation. So a lot of people, they would have to go shopping, but you could buy clothes, but you may not be able to try them on. So whatever you had to keep it. So I'm thinking that there were probably a lot of people in the area, or enough people in the area in Harlem, who were actually making clothes. There were probably little shops where people could go to and get custom clothes made. So like this outfit, it's very possible what she's wearing in Josephine Baker. Maybe somebody in Harlem might have made it for her. But the thing is that also during this period, there was a time of where a lot of people from the South moved to the North. You have a lot of Black seamstresses who ended up working on 7th Avenue, what we call 7th Avenue now, working with the immigrants, or they were actually used as strike breakers. So these women, these Black women who were seamstresses, I call them my heroes, they would sometimes get beat up going to work because they were used as strike breakers. So they were getting beat up going to work, and then they get in there and they may work 10, 12 hours easily, and they were underpaid. So these seamstresses, they had a heavy load, I'm sure. So I wouldn't doubt it very seriously if some of those women had what I call a side hustle, in that they were making clothes for some of the people of Harlem, because times were very different then. They couldn't really go to Macy's. There was no fast fashion. This was it. So it's like my mother. My mother was a seamstress, and she used to make clothes in Detroit for women who would buy fabrics from Europe and bring it back, and she would make like a coat. She would make a matching dress, and she had a room in the basement. And this was like in the 50s and 60s. So I am sure that there were a lot more women who made a lot of these clothes for their, you know, private clientele during this period. Now I know Ann Lowe, oh, go back. I know Ann Lowe was around at the time, but she was in and out of New York. So, and plus she says she would only work for high society people anyway. But I'm thinking that there were private seamstresses and designers. And they're just very elegant. One last thing I want to show you too is right here, this swimsuit. That looks like something you could wear on the street now. But that was actually their swimwear. She's all covered up. That was their swimwear. This was being liberating for them. And this is something you probably would have worn earlier in the maybe early 1900s. You might have worn something like that under your clothes, because before there were part of the 20s, what was happening was that the things that women were wearing under their clothes before were the things they decided to wear outside now. So like slip dresses became popular. Things were easy. Things were sportier. So like the pants. So that was a very important transition for clothing during this period. The pants again, men's jackets, all of that, the fur. See, they're looking very glamorous here with their hats, their furs, the scarves. Here again, the fur. This probably has a head on it. I wouldn't doubt it if that's one of those fur on the bottom right, where she has the big, looks like a church hat almost, with the fur, with the head on it possibly. So it was a very elegant and dressy time. Now, don't get me wrong. There were still a lot of poor people in Harlem. Everyone wasn't this fly, because it was still a time of oppression and switching over, and people were adjusting to the North. I mean, there was still prejudice in the North. There was still struggle. So everyone wasn't so fly, but it was an amazing period for women's wear, because things were starting to change a lot in women's wear. So the next thing is menswear. And
Hello.
This is for Leonard. Leonard, you want to join in now?
Yes. Hi. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. And well, I'm going to jump right in. Menswear is very exciting for men's who are just arriving in Harlem at this time. What's key for you to understand is that Black men in Harlem were largely working class men. So during their weeks, practically 6 days a week, men wore their work-related clothing, their uniforms. They had jobs such as bus drivers, Pullman porters, taxi drivers, elevator operators, truck drivers, etc. So there was little need for you to get dressed up, if you can understand it. Typically, unless there was a special occasion during the week, such as like a church meeting or a party, or just if you wanted to go out at night for a stroll on the boulevard on Lenox Avenue, just to be seen. Also, I mentioned parties, and I just want to say that during that time, one large social event that people would have would be rent parties, okay? Because everything was about generating a couple of dollars. So that would be a reason for you to put something on and go out hanging out, okay? But on the weekends, then all bets were off. Everything changed on the weekends. Black men were judged by the way they looked. Style was important. If you had that swagger, if you know how to come through, okay, that's how you would judge. Would say don't judge a book by the cover, but that didn't apply here. You would judge by the way you looked. So on the weekends, you got to make your first stop. Gentlemen, the barbershop. Everybody ran in and got a haircut, got the crew cut, got all shaped up. Second stop, shoe shine stand. You had to polish and buff those shoes until you could see your reflection in those shoes. So then third stop, the color shop. You want to go and pick up your suit, okay? Now let me not make you make any mistake about this. These are men moving up from the South. A lot of men, my father included, my grandfather, were tailors. They could make their own suits. They knew how to take a tattered suit and mend it. A lot of men had the skill, okay? And I'm gonna tell you an interesting story. Jazz musicians very often were selected by the way they looked. And so very often you would take a chance, or they would take a chance and go and buy a suit and look fantastic. Show up for the audition, and if they got the part, fine. If they didn't get the part, they would go right back and return the suit and get their money back. So this was what was so important at that time, because if you looked like $1 million, you had $1 million. That was most important at the time. Every man had their own individual style. See, some were more conservative, like you see at Langston Hughes over here, and wore, you know, his Stetson hat. Brand names were important, and tweed jacket, as you can see. But then the guy to the left, oh no, no, come on. You gotta have, you know, the right hat, the white hat. This is his personal style. Okay, so that's what was important at this time, for men to come out and present themselves, because you had two goals. A, you were trying to be seen and build your reputation and show people. And number two, most important, you were trying to pull the ladies. You were trying to get some attention, get something going on here. Okay, so now the other thing too, gentlemen, as you were out there, all the men were wearing all of this fabulous, fabulous clothes and whatnot, but they would meet on the streets with one another and judge one another, because, you know, men have their own sort of club, their own camaraderies amongst themselves. And so when you see the men, you know, see one another, they're judging one another, they're sizing one another up. You know, Harlem was a congested community at the time, and so you either look right or wrong. And it wasn't like like Shawna had said before about going out to buy something. It was about personal style, how you were able to hook it up. Okay, now you see there in the middle, Cap Calloway wearing the what? Your zoot suit. There was a controversy about the zoot suit because it sort of erupted. I mean, it clearly, in my mind and in my research, the zoot suit style was created in Harlem. Again, out of this need for men to express their personal style and to break loose from tradition. It's exaggerated, yeah, but you know what? During that time period, and then at the end of the beginning of the 30s into the 40s, we were headed towards World War II. And so fabric was being rationed. Everything was getting scarce. And so there was a backlash against people because everybody was making the sacrifice to not utilize and overuse resources that could go to the war. So there was a backlash for those who would come out with this type of extravagance at a time when we were all sacrificing and not overusing, okay, towards the war effort. But you know, we always got young people who are rebellious, who want to say, you know what, I hear you, I get that, but I am not grandma. I'm not even ma. I am me, and I want to express my individuality. So that's where the movement for the zoot suit sort of came in, and it started. Now, it's what history is. What his story. So various other communities and other states have sort of claimed it, and they said, no, it started out in California. No, we started it over here in Philly. So a lot of different stories that sort of circulate around the specifics in terms of where the zoot suit originated. But I'm gonna tell you something.
Tell me, Leonard.
In Harlem, USA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonard.
So let's move on. We're going to move on to us social occasions. In Harlem, people dressed for the social occasions. There were numerous social events that touched the daily lives of most Harlemites, which gave men and women reasons for getting dressed up. Events such as weddings and funerals, of course, church services, theater events and shows, sports events, debutante balls, nightclubs, civic events, political meetings. There used to be a fabulous Harlem Day parade. So you see all of these photographs here, which I think all of them are James Vanderzee photographs, who was one of the top photographers at the time. He photographed all of Harlem. The elegance and the style of Harlem that was so important at that time. But these people typically were dressed for an event. They weren't walking around the house in a fur coat. So this is sort of, you can anticipate where they were going, what they were doing, and the fact that they were doing it in style. Did they have money? Can you tell Did they live in that car, or they rented that car? Did they own that car? You will never know, because that's what was all about. Image. If you look like a million, you had a million. And that's how people regarded you, based on how you could be sleeping under a rock. It didn't matter, because people had come up from the north, from the south up to the north, and they were determined to make it and to fit in. And they were there amongst that Harlem community. Alain Locke wrote this book, The New Negro. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of that book, where it sort of gave a narrative of this new spirit, this new individual who was just not going to no longer conform to what was expected of African Americans at that time. So, okay, let's move on because the next important category is hairstyles. You know, for Black people now, hair is everything. You got to be right or you're wrong. That's all it is. Previous to the 20s, women wore long hair. And Black women in particular, many of them have difficulty getting long hair, growing that hair long. It would go to a certain point and so Madam Walker was one of the pioneers in the hair care industry and creating products to help women to groom and to grow their hair, okay? But soon after the war, the new trend started, which is during the 20s, after World War I, the trend changed and everybody's wearing bobbed hairstyles. See, we still followed the fashion. Fashion still followed from Europe, from Paris. And so all of the women in Paris were all wearing these bobbed hairstyles. And so everybody was, but we were doing it uniquely. So all the African American women would go to their beauty parlors and say, okay, girl, hit me up. Give me the latest style. And a chart like this would be up on the wall and the beautician would say, pick a style. What do you want? And say, well, give me that Marcel. Give me that Marcel style. You know, I want that. Look up here and say, you know what? See the one at the bottom, girlish? I love that. It has a little bang there in the front. And, you know, it's stick to, give me that. That's what I want. So that's how women would come. Now, also, the masculine look was in because from Paris, Coco Chanel had started giving us that little androgyny that had come into fashion. Women could look a little bit more masculine as they wore their hats and all. See the style, short, bob, bangs. Everybody didn't have good hair. Some people did, some people didn't. It didn't matter. Wigs were not prevalent at this time. So now here's another little secret. When you really had a bad hair day, you could also wear a cloche hat. Cloche is a French word for bell. Everybody had these little short little hats they could wear and hide your hair if you were having a bad hair day, which often happens sometimes. So women also went into the beauty parlors and asked to get a little piece on this. Could you get hair pieces were born at that time because you could get something to match your hair and embellish what you had. Let me just also segue to the fact of men's, because men's hairstyle as well. Men were wearing pomade on their hair, okay, and getting a slick way. Men would put on a stocking cap, and that would create a nice wave pattern in their hair. And once you go to your barber and you get all lined up and stuff, that would be fabulous. But you know, that look of the slick, wavy pomade hair gave you the look of good hair. Which is something that, well, everybody thinks, we understand what good hair, there's good hair and bad hair. Okay, but then let's move on. So accessories was most important at this time because again, it was a point of being creative, doing something with what you have. Everybody didn't have money to run out and buy something new. So then you had to accessorize. How could you accessorize what you have? With flowers, with a string of pearls, multiple strings of pearls, or otherwise other jewelry. Fur for collars, for cuffs, a cloche hat, as you can see, which if you know, like I said, if you had long hair, you could do it. If you had short hair, you were okay. You could put a little ribbon, a little band, a little feather in your hat, okay? Embellish what you have. Women wore silk stockings. See the ladies there? That silk stocking had a seam in the back, which had to be straight. Don't come out there with no straight, no crooked seams now. Women wore peep toe shoes. What is a peep toe shoe? A shoe that's made with a little wedge in the front where your one big toe is showing. That shoe, that toe had to be painted. You can't come out there with that big toe is not ready and not painted. And that's you have the other accessories that women would wear would be satin gloves, okay? Beaded handbags were important. Cigarette holders for flappers, scarves. You could do a lot with a scarf, okay? So there were a lot of different accessory items that you could use to embellish what you were wearing. See your shoes there, the peep toe shoe in the go. And ladies, look at the beautiful faces. That's all you really needed. And then you could just embellish around that. Throw your flower on, drop some pearls on. You could embellish what you had and look fresh. You see what I'm saying? And that was the creative thing about accessories. Men as well. Men wore caps and hats, but they were brand names. Okay, Stetson, big hats of the day. Men wore wingtip shoes, but they different names. You know, Johnson Murphy, Stetson. You know, Winchester. These were big important names. Men wore suspenders or a belt. You'd have a gold pocket watch. That was important. Handkerchief squares, yes. Cufflinks, okay. And tie clips. If you really want to do it. Then men have to come along and say, okay, fine. A gold tooth. Yes, I'm sorry. It sounds all country and backwards now, but back in the day, if you had a gold, diamond-studded gold tooth, you were on. You were on. You won. You had it. You had it hands down. And the ladies were all there going, ooh, cool, Papa Bell. So
Right.
that was most important at the time. So like, it was an exciting time. I get excited talking about it.
Yes, you do. And it's good. So we're going to talk about our last thing, which is Harlem Renaissance today. What are the trends that happened then that are still continuing today? I didn't do all of them, but I have enough of them to show you that the inspiration and the influence of Harlem Renaissance is still happening today. Check this out. So you see this top left picture? That's Prada. This is Prada. And you see the look on the right? That's the wave. That's the wave that the girls used to wear back in the day. See, and they had baby hair and the waves, and these girls today think they're doing something new. Well, actually, you need to talk to your grandma, because this is how they looked and they did it first. I thought it was amazing. And I think that all of this looks fabulous today still. Next slide. Feathers. Look at this. That's Josephine Baker in the middle. But look at the current looks today. That's Valentino on the right in the pink. So these type of looks that started with people like Josephine Baker during that period still continue today. And different feathers. You don't have to wear the whole feather outfit. You might have a feather in a hat, or maybe there's a few feathers on a skirt or something. But these are similar looks to what happened during the Harlem Renaissance. Next slide. Look at the two-piece swimwear that was happening back then. Look, the little fitted skirt or the little flirty skirt, high waist swimsuits. They're a big trend now, and they look great. It was a trend that happened then, and it works now. It still looks fabulous. So that was swimwear then, swimwear now. Still going with that same look. Slip dresses. So this is Josephine Baker on the left. Slip dresses and the influence of underwear was really important during this period. And the influence of like lingerie fabrics, like soft velvets or satin. And in the middle, this is just different pictures of collections from all over the world. The right, the little slip dress. So that whole influence of these dresses that were like beautifully made from the 20s, that dress she's wearing, actually, in Josephine Baker, will look great today. It look totally great today. short or long. It will look fabulous. Next slide. Okay, the influence of this whole zoot suit. Check out the jacket on the left, the coat on the left, the huge shoulder, see, and the menswear influence of suiting. So this is the thing. People today, the young kids think that this whole big shoulder look came from the 80s. It really started back in the 30s. You know, if you do your homework a little, get off Instagram, maybe you'll find these out, but whatever. I digress, I won't go there. So this look is still very much prevalent today in women's clothing. Okay, can we go to the next? Pearls. You see how pearls were so popular back then? Well, guess what? They're still continuing. As a matter of fact, Kamala Harris loves pearls. She wears them. So I think she's actually bringing them back as a popular thing. So these are from Chanel. Chanel back in the day actually did a lot of pearls, but the pearls are still very much popular in jewelry today. Next slide. Next. Furs. You see these girls in the middle with their fabulous furs, the fur collar. Well, that top jack coat on the left is Prada, with the big fur collar and that easy coat shape, double breasted. That's very similar to what they would wear during that period, or just big fur collars like this that they're wearing from Gucci and this other designer on the bottom left. So that trend is still very much very popular today. Next. So I just want to give a shout out to this young lady, and this is my last slide. Her name is Marissa Wilson, young designer out of New York. And I think that is actually really fabulous that she used the Harlem Renaissance as her inspiration. This is a young person. And that shows you the influence that Harlem Renaissance has even today. She used these two great Art Deco-y kind of prints that were influenced by Black artists on this printed velvet in her dress and in her shirt. And this cute little dress over here, I think she calls it the Josephine, that gives you a feeling of this whole easy lingerie feeling that was very prevalent during that time. So I think it's wonderful that the kids today are, like with the hair and like with this, are actually getting into the Harlem Renaissance. And I think it's a fabulous thing. And I think there will be more going forward, and it's not going to end. I think it will just continue and continue to influence designers. It's going to influence us in music, in literature, everything in the future, and it's here to stay forever. And that's it. That's our presentation today. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Leonard, for joining me.
Right.
And thank you, SOAR and the Wright Museum for having us. We really greatly appreciate it.
Shawna and Leonard, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I appreciate the energy and the enthusiasm. really got into it. It's great.
Thank
So
you.
we've got a few comments and questions from people. One was a surprise that Betty Boop was originally Black. Is there?
Yeah.
I know somebody posted some links, but is there any other information that you may have?
Leonard, do you have I think I don't have too much information on her because I was focusing mostly on the clothing and the style of her. But I do know that she was the original Betty, was the inspiration for Betty Boop. You can see through the hair and the clothing. And there was someone who saw her perform, and they took what she did and took it downtown and switched it and made it her own.
Okay.
You know, and that's how the Betty Boop that you know today came to be, was originally inspired by her, because that happened a lot. A lot of the white patrons came from downtown. They came uptown to look at, like I said, the Cotton Club, and they take that inspiration back downtown. So it wasn't just with the big band or with the zoot suit or with the clothing is with her as well.
Yeah, could and I didn't want to interrupt you while you were speaking.
That's
but,
okay.
There was a Black entertainer during the 20s that used to perform at the Cotton Club. Her name was Esther Jones. They called her Baby Esther. And
That was her.
yeah, Baby Esther. And so she
Esther Jones.
Right. She performed at the Cotton Club. And so this is a photograph of her. And so this is her style. And so that was adopted primarily at the time by the cartoon industry to create the caricature, the little cartoon character, Betty Boop, which is probably started more so in the, was around during the 30s and into the 30s, into the 40s. But this is the impetus for the Betty Boop.
She was the original inspiration.
Yeah, for Betty Boop. But that's her right there. And her name.
In the middle.
Yeah, Esther Jones.
Miss Jones. My daughter just posted it too, Esther.
Yeah. Another question was the fact that you had similar styles possibly that the whites were wearing at the time. There's several questions about how did that go back and forth between who was affecting who, or was it, maybe
fashion is always fashion is fashion, and fashion at the time in America was being led by what was fashionable in Europe. One of the featured designers at the time was Coco Chanel. So the flapper dress. So Coco Chanel back in the 20s at the really early part of the century, she came through with this style with simple dresses. We were coming out of the Victorian period with all the corsets and girdles and waist cinches and all of that restriction. And so she was a person that broke away from all of that and gave us simple dresses that just hung from the shoulders pretty much and straight down. Also, what influenced fashion at that time was dancing, because the Charleston was big. And that was what your flappers did, that little steppy little. But so you had to move, you couldn't do all that swing dancing and stuff like that with these restrictive clothing on. So women needed loose outfits that they could wear. And so they would embellish. You drop your pearls on, you put your little hat and your feather, you were done. And they were out there dancing all night and having a ball.
With comfortable shoes.
And you didn't have to wear a bra, you didn't have to wear a girdle, you didn't have to do any of those things. And then women were out having fun. So it was that new period of dress, but fashion was influenced, and still in many cases, fashion is influenced by what's going on in Paris, because that was specifically at that time, America followed Parisian fashion. The world did, if you will, at that time.
Shawna, could you talk a little bit more about your mom as a seamstress? Because some of those stories are just really kind of very touching.
Oh, thank you for even asking that. So my mother is my biggest inspiration. I mean, she was a seamstress. So it's interesting. I'm talking about the Great Migration. That's similar to my family story. They originated from Oklahoma and they moved to Detroit in the late 30s, I think it was. So my grandmother had skills of sewing. A lot of Black women did. So they just passed it down generation to generation. So my mother learned how to sew from her mother. And so my mother, when she was sewing here in Detroit, she would make clothes for very wealthy women here in Detroit area who would go to Paris and they would buy fabrics. I remember this as a kid. They would buy fabrics and she would make these like coats, like a top coat with a matching sheath dress underneath. And maybe it was in a Duchess silk satin or some kind of taffeta. And they were always in these beautiful colors like an emerald green or blue. I remember this. And she had, sometimes would put a mink fur collar on them. So my mother had this business that was pretty successful for her. And it was in the basement of our house. And that was one of the things that inspired me as a kid. I mean, mind you, I didn't know there was such a thing as a fashion designer. I only thought that there were seamstresses. So that was the beginning of my interest in being a fashion designer, but I didn't know it. But she was amazing. And you know what? Those girls who made clothes back then, the detail was amazing. It's not fast fashion. It's not zip, zip, zip on the machine, wash and wear. is these are clothes that you treasure and they last for years.
One other question was talking about the young blacks right now wearing dreads and African American costumes and that kind of colors, the fabrics, etc. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Where we're going with that?
Well, you know, and Leonard, you can pipe in whenever you want to on this. My feeling is that
Well, I'm
this.
saying, look,
Oh, you have it on. So
excuse
not
me.
just the young people, obviously.
Excuse me.
Leonard, we were talking about young people, so that fits you perfectly.
Well,
He's young in spirit.
That's right.
yes, but it's cultural. It's cultural, and
Yeah,
you
we're in a
know-
cultural movement, very similar to the 70s, I would say.
know the origins of clothing and fashion, the origins of weaving and dyeing of fabrics and colors and all that originate from Africa. Okay.
Right.
There's a whole study about the inclusion of African Americans and the contributions that African Americans have made to American style from its inception. And so that a lot of that is not recorded in history books because a lot of slaves were dressmakers. They didn't have those titles, as Shawna had alluded, of designer, because who knew? But they were also making styles. You know, the person who made the inaugural dress for Mary Todd Lincoln in the White House was Elizabeth Cackley, a Black woman at the time who was sewing for the elite of Washington, D.C. in the 1860s. She was the confidant and friend of Mary Todd Lincoln as one of the unique people that was in the White House at the time of the assassination and a friend of Mary's. Okay?
But she was a slave before, who learned her skills as a slave. Right. And then she took it and started when she got her freedom.
Right. Ann Lowe also came up from the South, and she came from that background. So we have been, African Americans have been designing for the red carpet and the White House all the way from that period all the way up to Michelle Obama. You know what I'm saying? The designers. So we are very much entrenched. African Americans are entrenched in American style, influencing what Americans have been wearing since its inception, but we have not received the credit credit that we should have gotten over the years.
Agreed.
But the influence of this whole African pride that we're having is going to continue. Right. You know, I don't think it's going away. I just think that we want to have a sense of the motherland and take pride in that. We are African and American, so we want to be able to, like I said, take pride in our culture from the homeland. And I think the young kids are really embracing that. And I don't think the trend is going away at all. It's not a trend, it's a lifestyle.
I have one interesting question was talking about the fact that, you know, after the Roaring 20s, where there was just everything, a lot of sophistication, a lot of money being spent. Eventually, we ended up with the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. How did that affect the clothing styles going from one era to another?
Well, they had to become more conservative. Right, Leonard? Like, it's sort of like the example of the zoot suit. I mean, that zoot suit was done during the Great Depression. There was a lot of fabric in that suit, and people were kind of pissed off about it because there was a lot of fabric in it, and it just seemed very kind of tongue-in-cheek in a way, you could say, or they just felt that we're supposed to be conservative right now. We're supposed to be you know, watching what we do, watching what we eat, how we do it. And it was just very grand for that time period.
Right. And a lot during the war, actually, too, men in particular wore their uniforms. And so there was no need for buying clothing. And women who were here joined the war effort. And so many women were working in factories and just dealing. I mean, they were left behind to maintain the families, you know, and to make a living however they could while their husbands were away. Many husbands didn't return, but I didn't say that. But the point is, women had to do, they had to make do, with what they had. We've already alluded to the fact that many men and women were capable of making their own clothing, okay, and mending clothing and getting what was called secondhand clothing, okay, and updating them and turning them into something fancy or style or something that ways in which you could embellish your clothing and look stylish if you had a need for it. But that was really more so a time of practicality. Okay?
Sustainability before it was sustainability was a trend.
And all the resources went
Really?
towards the war. So fabrication, the polyesters and wools and all those things that were because that's why poly was created during that time period, because all the wool and natural fibers went towards uniforms and towards the war effort. So we didn't have, so the cheaper fabrics at that time, which were created, was polyester because it's not actual.
It's durable too.
Right. It's man-made and it's not natural.
And it's durable. You could wash and wear.
Excellent. Well, once again, as you can see in the comments, there's a lot of people who are just excited about your presentation, excited about the energy in the presentation. I noticed we had
Leonard had coffee this morning.
I drink coffee every morning.
2 cups today.
Look, I want to show you my father's. This is my grandfather's pocket watch.
Oh, and he's with you today.
Yeah, because you wore a vest and you had the 2 pockets. So one side was in one side of the pocket and the other. Right. And if you would really want to be stylish, you on the avenue, you kind of slip your hand every now and then and take it and kind of see what time it is.
Time for us to go. That's what time it is.
If you've been doing it, you got to do it.
That's right.
Leonard.
I noticed that we had, I believe last time I looked, we had like 136 people participating. So it was, I had a lot of people that were very interested. We also have the times and hours of the Charles Wright Museum posted. And so just a good time to remind people that there's some fantastic artifacts to be seen there. And if you haven't been there, please take a look, because it's a great trip. It's a great visit. I'd like to thank you for your presentations, and any last words you have.
Well, thank you for having us. I appreciate it. I mean, it was a joy to be here and to share this information that we're very passionate about with everyone. And I hope they enjoyed it. And I just want to thank Reggie, who invited us to come and do this, because if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here.
I agree.
Thank you, Reggie.
Reggie started the whole ball moving there. So.
Yeah, my good friend.
I didn't have that much coffee, but I enjoyed the presentation. It was great.
Well, thank you, Shawna. Thank you, Leonard.
Thank you, Leonard, for joining me.
Have a great day.
I hope everyone enjoyed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.